Hunger clawed at Harper Lawson's empty stomach as she stumbled through the dusty streets of Silveridge, Montana Territory, 1876. The morning sun beat down on her tattered blue dress, once fine but now frayed at the edges after weeks on the road. She twisted the gold band on her finger, her mother's wedding ring, the last remnant of a life that had crumbled to dust back in St. Louis. The smell of fresh bread wafted from the general store, making her dizzy with longing. 3 days without food had left her desperate enough to part with her final treasure. Harper pushed through the door, the little bell announcing her entrance. The shopkeeper, a stout man with spectacles perched on his nose, barely glanced up from his ledger. "What can I do for you, miss?" he asked, his tone disinterested. Her voice came out as a whisper. "I was wondering if you might trade." Harper twisted the ring off her finger, placing it on the counter with trembling hands. For bread, just enough to last a few days. The shopkeeper picked up the ring, examining it under the lamp, his expression soured. "Not worth much, I'm afraid. Maybe half a loaf at most." "Please," Harper said, fighting back tears. "It's real gold. It was my mother's. Real gold maybe, but thin as paper." He set it back down, sliding it toward her with indifference. "Times are hard all over, miss. Can't be giving away inventory." A shadow fell across the counter as the door opened again. Harper didn't turn, too focused on the ring that represented her final hope. "2 loaves of your freshest bread, Jim, and whatever else the lady needs," came a deep voice from behind her. Harper turned to see a tall man silhouetted against the doorway. As he stepped into the light, she took in his appearance: worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, dusty boots, and a wide-brimmed hat pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of a summer sky. A cowboy by the look of him, though he carried himself with an authority that suggested he was more than a simple ranch hand. The shopkeeper straightened immediately. "Of course, Mr. Ironwood, right away." The stranger turned to Harper, and she felt herself flush under his gaze. He nodded toward the ring still sitting on the counter. "Keep it," he said quietly. "You'll have both with me." Harper stiffened, her pride rising through her hunger. "I don't accept charity from strangers, sir." A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Not charity, a job offer. I'm Vaughn Ironwood. I own the Double Bar Ranch outside town, looking for someone to help with cooking and housekeeping. Pay includes room and board." Harper hesitated, slipping the ring back onto her finger. A job meant survival, but going alone to a ranch with a man she'd never met. "I don't know the first thing about you, Mr. Ironwood. Ask anyone in town about me," he said with a shrug. "I'll wait." The shopkeeper placed 2 loaves of bread on the counter. "If it helps, Mr. Ironwood's good for his word. Finest ranch in the territory. Lost his housekeeper last month when she got married." Harper studied Vaughn Ironwood's face. There was no leering, no impropriety in his gaze, just a straightforward offer that might mean the difference between starving and surviving. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Everyone needs a hand sometimes," he said simply. "Besides, I've been eating my own cooking for weeks. Another day and I might poison myself." Despite everything, Harper laughed. The sound surprised her. She hadn't laughed since leaving St. Louis. "I'm Harper Lawson," she said, extending her hand. "And I accept your offer, Mr. Ironwood, provided the arrangement remains professional." He took her hand briefly. "Wouldn't have it any other way, Miss Lawson." He gestured to the bread. "That's yours. Eat while I finish my business in town. We'll head to the ranch after." Harper broke off a piece of bread, trying to maintain her dignity while her stomach screamed for food. "Thank you." As Vaughn conducted his business, Harper ate slowly, savoring each bite. She didn't know what awaited her at the Double Bar Ranch, but for the first time in weeks, tomorrow didn't seem quite so frightening. The ride to the Double Bar Ranch took nearly 2 hours. Harper sat beside Vaughn on the wagon bench, clutching her small carpet bag containing everything she still owned in the world. The landscape spread before them in waves of gold and green, punctuated by rocky outcroppings and the occasional stand of pines. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the sky. "It's beautiful," Harper said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Most days," Vaughn agreed. "Though in winter when the blizzards hit, or summer when drought turns everything to dust, it can be the hardest place on earth. You speak as though you've been here a long time. Born and raised, he replied. My father started the ranch with 12 head of cattle and a dream. Now we run over 2,000 head across 20,000 acres. Harper nodded, impressed despite herself. And your family, a shadow crossed his face. Lost my parents 3 years ago, influenza. My younger brother Vernon helps run the place, but he's in Denver now, arranging a cattle sale. I'm sorry about your parents, Harper said quietly. I lost mine too, my father to the war and my mother last winter. Vaughn glanced at her. What brings you all the way out here from? St. Louis, she supplied, and it's a long story, Mr. Ironwood. We've got time, he said, but didn't press when she remained silent. As they crested a hill, the double-bar ranch came into view, a sprawling main house built of sturdy logs and river stone, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and several cowboys worked in the corrals. Home, Vaughn said simply. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the main house. A weathered cowboy with a salt and pepper beard approached. Hank, Vaughn greeted him. This is Miss Lawson. She'll be taking over the housekeeping. Hank touched the brim of his hat. Madam, 'bout time we got some decent cooking around here again. No promises on the cooking, Harper warned with a small smile, but I'll do my best. Vaughn helped her down from the wagon. Hank's my foreman. Known him since I was in short pants. Which wasn't that long ago, Hank chuckled. Boy's only 28 but thinks he knows everything. And you're 60 and still don't know how to make coffee that doesn't taste like tar, Vaughn retorted good-naturedly. Harper followed Vaughn into the house, surprised by its size and comfort. Though clearly a man's domain with practical furnishings and few decorative touches, it was clean and well-built, with large windows that let in ample light. Your quarters are through here, Vaughn said, leading her down a hallway to a small but pleasant room at the back of the house. It's not fancy, but it's private. The room contained a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk, and a window overlooking a kitchen garden. To Harper, after weeks of sleeping in barns or under the stars, it looked like paradise. It's perfect, she said honestly. Thank you. Bathrooms down the hall. There's a pump in the kitchen for water. We usually eat at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 in the evening. He hesitated at the door. I'll leave you to get settled. Come to the kitchen when you're ready and I'll show you around. When Vaughn had gone, Harper sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself a moment to breathe. The mattress was firm but comfortable, and the room smelled of soap and sunshine. She unpacked her meager belongings, a change of clothes, a hairbrush, a small book of poetry, and a daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day. The gold ring glinted on her finger as she arranged her things. Just that morning, she'd been willing to trade it for bread. Now she had both, just as Vaughn had promised. It seemed too good to be true, and Harper had learned the hard way that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Yet there was something about Vaughn Ironwood that inspired trust, despite her determination to remain wary. His eyes were clear and direct, his manner straightforward. If he had ulterior motives for bringing her here, he hid them well. Harper changed into her cleanest dress, washed her face and hands at the basin, and pinned up her dark hair before venturing to the kitchen. She found Vaughn there, attempting to light the wood stove. Need some help, she offered. He looked up with a rueful smile. My talents lie elsewhere, I'm afraid. Been eating cold beans from the can for days. Harper took over, expertly adjusting the damper and getting the fire going properly. What supplies do you have? Plenty, though some might be past their prime. The cellar's stocked with preserves from last fall, and there's a smokehouse out back with ham and bacon. Then we won't starve, Harper said, already rolling up her sleeves. By sunset, she had prepared a simple but satisfying supper of ham, beans, and cornbread. Vaughn and 3 cowboys who worked the closest pastures gathered at the long kitchen table, looking at the hot food with undisguised appreciation. Miss Lawson, Vaughn said after his first bite, I believe I made the best decision of my life today. Harper blushed at the praise but couldn't help feeling a small surge of pride. It's just simple cooking. After what we've been eating, it's a feast, said one of the cowboys, a young man introduced as Charlie. The men ate with enthusiasm, talking of cattle and the day's work, occasionally including Harper in their conversation, but never in a way that made her uncomfortable. When they had finished, they thanked her sincerely before heading out to the bunkhouse, leaving her alone with Vaughn. "You don't have to clean up tonight," he said, rising to help clear the table. "You've done enough for your first day." "I don't mind," Harper insisted. "I'd rather establish a routine from the start." They worked together in companionable silence, Harper washing the dishes while Vaughn dried them. "Tomorrow I'll show you around the ranch," he said as they finished. "So you know where everything is. I'd like that." Harper hesitated, then added, "Mr. Ironwood, I want to thank you properly for your kindness today. You didn't have to help a stranger." "Vaughn," he corrected. "And maybe I recognized something in you, Miss Lawson. Determination, pride, good qualities out here." "Harper," she offered in return. "And what you recognized was probably desperation." His expression grew serious. "No, I saw a woman unwilling to give up what mattered to her, even when it would have been easier to do so. That gold band means something to you beyond its value." Harper twisted the ring on her finger, an unconscious habit. "It was my mother's, the last thing she gave me before she died." Vaughn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then I'm glad you kept it." That night, lying in her new bed, Harper listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional whinny of horses in the barn, the creak of the house settling. For the first time in months, her hunger was satisfied and she felt safe. Yet as she drifted towards sleep, a whisper of doubt crept into her mind. She had run from one bad situation only to place herself entirely at the mercy of a man she barely knew. Vaughn Ironwood seemed honorable, but she had been fooled before. "One day at a time," Harper murmured to herself, closing her eyes. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. For tonight, at least, she had a roof over her head and food in her belly. And somehow, miraculously, she still had her mother's ring. Dawn broke clear and bright over the double-bar ranch. Harper woke with the first light, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering where she was. She dressed quickly in her worn but clean blue dress and made her way to the kitchen to begin breakfast. To her surprise, Vaughn was already there, stoking the stove fire. "You're up early," she commented, tying an apron around her waist. "Ranch work doesn't wait for the sun," he replied. "Coffee's brewing, hope that's all right." "Perfect," Harper said, examining the pantry stores with a critical eye. "How do you feel about flapjacks?" "Like I've died and gone to heaven," Vaughn said with such enthusiasm that Harper laughed. By the time the ranch hands arrived for breakfast, Harper had prepared a stack of golden flapjacks, fried salt pork, and a pot of beans. The men ate with gusto, complimenting her cooking between bites. After breakfast, true to his word, Vaughn took Harper on a tour of the ranch. They walked through the barn where sleek horses nickered in their stalls, past the smokehouse and root cellar, and out to the kitchen garden, sadly neglected since the previous housekeeper had left. "This could be productive again with some work," Harper observed, kneeling to examine the soil. "There are herbs still growing wild, and it looks like someone planted tomatoes and beans." "All yours if you want to take it on," Vaughn said. "Extra vegetables would be welcome come fall." They continued to the chicken coop, where a dozen hens scratched in the dirt. "Eggs are your domain now too," Vaughn explained. "The hands don't have time to gather them properly." As they walked back toward the house, Harper noticed a small grave marker beneath a cottonwood tree. Fresh wildflowers lay on the mound of earth. "Who's buried there?" she asked softly. Vaughn's face tightened. "My wife, Sarah. She died in childbirth 2 years ago, the baby too." Harper's heart constricted. "I'm so sorry, I didn't know you were widowed." "Few people speak of it anymore," Vaughn said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's in the past." But Harper could see it wasn't not really. The fresh flowers proved that. This man who had shown such kindness to a stranger carried his own deep wounds. The days settled into a rhythm. Harper rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent her mornings cleaning and baking, her afternoons tending to the revived kitchen garden or mending clothes, and her evenings cooking supper for Vaughn and whichever hands were eating at the main house. Vaughn himself was often away from dawn until dusk, riding the range with his men, checking on cattle, mending fences, and handling the 1,000 tasks required to keep a large ranch functioning. Yet he always made time to check on Harper, to ask if she needed anything from town, or simply to share a cup of coffee and news of the day's work. 2 weeks after her arrival, Harper was kneading bread dough when Vaughn entered the kitchen, hat in hand. "I need to ride into town for supplies," he said. "Thought you might want to come along, get anything you need." Harper looked down at her flour-covered hands. "I'd like that. Give me a few minutes to finish this and change. Take your time. I'll hitch up the wagon." In town, Vaughn handled his business at the general store while Harper selected items for the kitchen: coffee, sugar, flour, and a few small luxuries like cinnamon and vanilla. When she approached the counter with her selections, she noticed the shopkeeper Jim. She now knew looking at her with interest. "Settling in at the double bar then, Miss Lawson?" he asked as he tallied her purchases. "Yes, thank you," Harper replied politely. "Good to see Vaughn with some company again," Jim commented. "Man's been too solitary since Sarah passed." Harper felt uncomfortable with the implication. "I'm just the housekeeper, Mr. Peterson." Jim raised an eyebrow but said nothing further as Vaughn approached with his own items. As they loaded their purchases into the wagon, a well-dressed man stepped out of the bank across the street. He spotted Vaughn and crossed over, his expression cordial but calculating. "Ironwood," he greeted. "Just the man I wanted to see." "Henderson," Vaughn acknowledged coolly. "What can I do for you?" "I've reconsidered your land, willing to offer $15 an acre for the north section." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "Not interested, Henderson. Not at 15, not at 50. That land's not for sale." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Every man has his price, Ironwood, even you." He tipped his hat toward Harper. "Madam." After he walked away, Harper looked questioningly at Vaughn. "Edmund Henderson," Vaughn explained as they climbed onto the wagon, "owns the bank and half the businesses in town. Been trying to buy pieces of my land for years." "Why that particular section?" Water rights. "The north section has the best access to Elkhorn Creek. Control that, and you control every ranch downstream." Vaughn flicked the reins, setting the horses in motion. "My father turned him down 20 years ago. I'm doing the same." On the ride back to the ranch, Harper found herself studying Vaughn's profile against the setting sun. In the weeks she'd known him, she'd come to respect his quiet strength, his fairness with his men, his dedication to the land his father had built. And something else had grown to something she was afraid to name. "You're staring, Miss Lawson," Vaughn said without looking at her, though a smile played at the corner of his mouth. Harper flushed. "Just thinking about how different my life might have been if I hadn't walked into that store the day we met." Now he did turn to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "You never did tell me what brought you to Silveridge." Harper looked down at her hands, at the gold ring that still adorned her finger. Perhaps it was time to trust someone with her story. "After my mother died, I had few options in St. Louis. My father's former business partner, Howard Maxwell, offered marriage. He was wealthy, respected, and 30 years my senior." She swallowed hard. "I accepted, believing it was my only choice." Vaughn remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "A week before the wedding, I overheard him speaking with another man. They were discussing my father's business, how Howard had deliberately ruined him, forced him into debt. My father's death during the war had been convenient for Howard, allowing him to take everything." Harper's voice hardened. "And now he would have my father's daughter too." "So you ran," Vaughn said quietly. Harper nodded. "That night, took what little money I had saved and headed west. By the time I reached Silveridge, I was penniless and desperate." "Do you think he's looking for you?" "I don't know. Howard is proud. He might simply claim I jilted him and find another bride. Or he might." She trailed off, unwilling to voice her fears. "If he comes looking," Vaughn said firmly, "he'll find more than he bargained for at the double bar." The simple promise of protection warmed Harper more than she cared to admit. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, the wagon swaying gently beneath them as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. That night, Harper added a teaspoon of precious vanilla to the apple cobbler she baked for supper. It was a small extravagance, but the look of delight on Vaughn's face when he tasted it made the expense worthwhile. "If you keep cooking like this," he said, helping himself to a second serving, "I'll have to let my belt out another notch." "You work too hard to worry about that," Harper replied, pleased by his enjoyment. After the meal, instead of retiring to his study as usual, Vaughn lingered at the table. Would you care to sit on the porch for a while? Night's too fine to waste indoors. Harper hesitated only briefly before nodding. Let me just clear these dishes first. Leave them, Vaughn said, just this once. Outside, the night air carried the scent of sage and pine. They sat side by side on the porch steps, looking out at the star-scattered sky. The moon hung low and golden on the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. My father used to say you could read the weather in the stars, Vaughn said, leaning back on his elbows. Clear night like this meant good weather coming. My mother believed you could read fortunes in them, Harper replied. She taught me the constellations when I was a girl. Show me, Vaughn requested. Harper pointed upward. There's Ursa Major the Great Bear, and there Cassiopeia the Queen. And that bright one is the North Star. The one that guides travelers home, Vaughn said softly. Harper lowered her arm, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. Yes, their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a moment Harper thought Vaughn might lean closer. Instead, he stood abruptly, offering her his hand. It's getting late, he said, and morning comes early on a ranch. Harper allowed him to help her up, ignoring the flutter of disappointment in her chest. Good night, Vaughn. Good night, Harper, he replied, his voice gentle in the darkness. As summer deepened, so did Harper's attachment to the double bar and to its owner. She expanded the kitchen garden, put up preserves for the coming winter, and transformed the main house with small touches that made it more of a home. A vase of wildflowers on the dining table. Curtains she sewed from fabric bought in town. A quilt she pieced together during the quiet evenings from scraps of old clothing. Vaughn noticed these changes, but commented on them only indirectly, remarking that the house hadn't felt so much like home since his mother was alive. The compliment, simply stated, meant more to Harper than flowery praise. July brought scorching heat and long days of hard work for the ranch hands. Harper rose even earlier to bake before the kitchen became unbearably hot, and spent her afternoons churning butter and making cheese in the relative cool of the root cellar. One particularly sweltering afternoon, she was returning from the garden with a basket of beans when she heard raised voices from the direction of the barn. Curious, she set down her basket and moved closer. No right to make demands, Henderson, Vaughn was saying, his voice tight with anger. No demands, Ironwood, just pointing out facts. The second voice belonged to Edmund Henderson, the banker from town. That loan your father took out to expand the herd 5 years ago, interest has been accumulating. You're 3 months behind on payments, because of the drought last year. You know that, we lost nearly a quarter of the herd. Business is business. I need $500 by the end of the month or I'll have to consider foreclosure proceedings. That's robbery and you know it, Vaughn growled. The cattle drive to Denver isn't until September. Not my problem, Henderson replied smoothly. Find the money or start packing your belongings. Harper retreated silently, not wanting to be caught eavesdropping. Her mind raced. $500 might as well be $5,000 for all the chance Vaughn had of raising it before the cattle drive. The drought had indeed been devastating, and while the ranch was land rich, it was cash poor until the herd could be driven to market. That evening, Vaughn was uncharacteristically quiet during supper. Harper served his favorite dish, chicken and dumplings, but he merely pushed the food around his plate. Is something wrong with the meal? She asked finally. Vaughn looked up, seeming to notice his full plate for the first time. No, it's fine, just not hungry, I guess. Is it the loan? Harper asked quietly, his head jerked up. How did you know about that? I overheard Henderson this afternoon, she admitted. I wasn't trying to listen, but it doesn't matter, Vaughn cut her off. Ranch business isn't your concern. The dismissal stung. Of course, I apologize for the intrusion. Vaughn's expression softened. No, I'm sorry, that was uncalled for. You've become important to the ranch, to me. I just don't want you worrying about things you can't change. Perhaps I could help, Harper suggested. I managed my father's accounts before he died. Vaughn hesitated, then nodded. All right, after supper we'll look at the books together. In Vaughn's study, they bent over the ledgers spread across his desk. Harper quickly saw the problem. The ranch was solvent on paper, with assets far exceeding debts, but those assets were tied up in land, cattle, and equipment. Liquid funds were almost non-existent. If we sold 10 head of cattle now, she began. At current prices, we'd get maybe $20 a head. And it would be admitting weakness to Henderson. Harper frowned, thinking, what about a bank in another town? Could you get a short-term loan to pay Henderson, then repay it after the cattle drive? Tried that. No bank will lend against cattle that haven't been sold yet. Too risky. They worked for hours, exploring and discarding various options. Eventually, Harper sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. There must be something we're missing, she said. Vaughn closed the ledger with a sigh. Sometimes, Harper, there isn't a neat solution. Sometimes you just have to weather the storm and hope you're still standing when it passes. As she prepared for bed that night, Harper caught sight of her mother's ring, glinting in the lamplight. Unlike the day she'd tried to trade it for bread, its value now seemed insignificant compared to what was at stake. The double bar wasn't just Vaughn's livelihood, it was his heritage, his father's dream, and the home of every man who worked there. The next morning, Harper rose before dawn and dressed carefully in her best dress. She left a note for Vaughn saying she needed to go to town for supplies and would be back by evening. Then she hitched up the light buggy herself, a skill she'd insisted on learning, and set off for Silveridge. The bank was just opening when Harper arrived in town. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and walked inside with more confidence than she felt. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Henderson, please," she told the young clerk at the counter. Moments later, she was shown into Henderson's private office. The banker looked up from his desk with surprise. "Miss Lawson, isn't it? Ironwood's housekeeper." "Yes, sir." Harper sat in the chair he indicated. "I've come about the loan." Henderson's eyebrows rose. "That's between me and Ironwood. Mr. Ironwood doesn't know I'm here," Harper admitted, "but I have a proposition for you." She removed her mother's ring and placed it on the desk. "This ring is solid gold, Mr. Henderson. It belonged to my mother, who inherited it from her mother. It's quite valuable." Henderson picked up the ring, examining it with a practiced eye. "Worth something, certainly, but not $500, Miss Lawson." "I'm aware of that," Harper said steadily, "but I'm also offering this." She placed a folded document on the desk. "The deed to 40 acres of prime farmland outside St. Louis. It belonged to my father and passed to me upon his death." This caught Henderson's attention. He unfolded the deed, scanning it quickly. "This appears genuine. Why would you offer such a thing for Ironwood's debts?" "My reasons are my own," Harper replied. "Do we have a deal? The land and the ring in exchange for canceling the loan and giving Mr. Ironwood a reasonable repayment schedule for any future borrowing." Henderson studied her thoughtfully. "You must care deeply for him to make such a sacrifice." Harper met his gaze without flinching. "Do we have a deal, Mr. Henderson?" After a moment, he nodded. "We do, Miss Lawson. I'll draw up the papers immediately." 2 hours later, Harper left the bank with the loan note marked "Paid in Full" and a new agreement that gave the double bar reasonable terms for repayment of the remaining smaller debts. The cost had been high, her last connection to her parents, and the only property she owned in her own name, but as she drove back toward the ranch, she felt a curious lightness. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she had chosen her own path, made her own sacrifice for something she believed in. Vaughn was waiting on the porch when she returned, his expression a mixture of worry and anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded as she climbed down from the buggy. "I've had men out looking for you." "I left a note," Harper said, surprised by his vehemence. "Gone to town for supplies isn't exactly informative," Vaughn retorted. "You've been gone all day, Harper. I thought," he broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You thought what?" "That you'd left, that Henderson had run you off somehow, that you'd decided the double bar wasn't worth staying for." The naked vulnerability in his voice made Harper's heart twist. "I wouldn't leave without saying goodbye," she said softly. Vaughn's gaze dropped to her hand, where the gold band was conspicuously absent. His expression changed, grew shuttered. "I see." "No, you don't," Harper said, reaching into her pocket and withdrawing the loan document. She held it out to him. "Here." Vaughn took the paper, unfolding it with a puzzled frown that transformed into disbelief as he read. "How?" Harper, what did you do? What was necessary, she said simply. Your ring, he said, his voice rough. And something else, I'm guessing. Henderson wouldn't settle for just a ring. Harper nodded. Some land in Missouri. It wasn't doing me any good, and the double bar needed it more. You had no right, Vaughn said, but there was more confusion than anger in his tone now. This wasn't your burden to bear. Perhaps not, Harper agreed, but it was my choice to make. Why? The single word contained a wealth of questions. Harper took a deep breath. She could offer practical reasons: her position at the ranch, her livelihood, but they would be half-truths at best. Because I care about this place, she said finally, and the people who call it home. She met his eyes directly. Because I care about you, Vaughn. For a long moment he simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate care, he folded the loan document and tucked it into his shirt pocket. We'll talk about this later, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Right now, I need to see to the north pasture fence. He walked away, leaving Harper standing alone by the buggy, uncertain whether she had committed an unforgivable overreach or taken the first step toward something deeper than employer and employee. That evening, Harper prepared supper mechanically, her thoughts still tangled around Vaughn's reaction or lack thereof to her confession. She had laid her heart bare, only to have him walk away without response. Pride stung nearly as much as disappointment. The meal was a quiet affair. Vaughn ate without comment, though he cleaned his plate for the first time in days. When he finished, he rose from the table. I'd like to speak with you in my study if you have a moment, he said formally. In the study, Vaughn closed the door behind them, then turned to face Harper. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his features, making him difficult to read. What you did today was foolish, he began, his voice low but intense. Giving up your inheritance for a ranch that isn't yours, for people who aren't your family. Harper lifted her chin. I disagree. I made a choice about my own possessions. The only foolish thing was thinking you might understand why. Oh, I understand why, Vaughn said, taking a step closer. What I don't understand is how I've earned such loyalty from you in such a short time. Perhaps it isn't about earning, Harper suggested. Perhaps it's simply given. Vaughn shook his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. No one gives something for nothing, Harper, not in my experience. Then your experience has been limited, she replied softly. Another step brought him close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, smell the faint scent of leather and prairie sage that always clung to him. I can't accept your sacrifice, he said. It's already done. Then I'll have to find a way to repay you. Harper sighed in frustration. I don't want repayment, Vaughn. I want. She never finished the sentence. In one fluid motion, Vaughn closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face as his lips found hers. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, but when Harper responded, it deepened into something hungry and needful. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vaughn rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the first week you were here, he confessed. But I didn't want you to think it was expected, that your position here depended on anything other than your work. And now, Harper asked, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he must hear it. Now I know that what I feel isn't one-sided. His thumb traced the curve of her cheek. But Harper, I need to be clear. I'm not offering you a position as my mistress. That's not what this is. What is it then? She asked, both thrilled and terrified by the intensity of his gaze. A beginning, Vaughn said simply, if you want it to be. Harper's answer was to rise on her toes and press her lips to his once more. August brought with it the hottest days of summer and a gradual shift in Harper's relationship with Vaughn. Nothing improper occurred. They were both too conscious of propriety and the watchful eyes of the ranch hands, but small changes accumulated. Vaughn's hand lingering on hers when she passed him the coffee. Quiet conversations on the porch after supper that stretched later into the evening. A brush of his lips against her temple when no one was looking. The ranch hands noticed, of course. Hank, the foreman, had taken to clearing his throat loudly before entering rooms, a courtesy that made Harper blush but which she appreciated nonetheless. The younger hands treated her with a new deference, no longer seeing her simply as the cook, but as someone who might soon have a more permanent place at the double bar. One evening in late August, Vaughn suggested a ride to show Harper a special place on the ranch she hadn't yet seen. They set out as the sun began its descent, casting long golden rays across the prairie grass. "Where are we going?" Harper asked as they rode side by side, her on a gentle mare Vaughn had selected for her use. "You'll see," he replied with a mysterious smile. "It's worth the ride, I promise." They followed a narrow trail that wound through a stand of cottonwoods and up a gradual slope. As they crested the hill, Harper gasped at the view spread before them, a small, pristine lake nestled in a natural bowl of land, its surface reflecting the sunset in shades of gold and crimson. "It's beautiful," she breathed, reining her horse to a stop beside Vaughn's. "My father called it Sarah's mirror after my mother," Vaughn explained as he dismounted and helped Harper down. "It's fed by underground springs, so it never dries up, even in drought years." They walked to the edge of the lake, where Vaughn spread a blanket on the soft grass. From his saddlebags, he produced a small feast: bread, cheese, dried apple slices, and a bottle of wine. "You planned this," Harper said, delighted by the surprise. "Guilty," Vaughn admitted, pouring wine into 2 tin cups. "I wanted us to have some time alone, away from the ranch." As they ate and drank, watching the sunset paint ever-changing colors across the lake's surface, Harper felt a contentment she had never known before. Here with Vaughn, she had found not just safety but belonging. "Harper," Vaughn said finally, setting aside his cup, "there's something I need to say." The seriousness in his tone made her turn to face him fully. "Yes, these past months, having you at the double bar, it's changed everything. The ranch feels like a home again, not just a place where I work and sleep." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the empty place where her mother's ring had been. "I know it's fast, maybe too fast, but I've never been more certain of anything." Harper's heart began to race as Vaughn reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. In the fading light, she could see it was a ring, a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," Vaughn explained. "I know it can't replace the one you gave up, but—" He took a deep breath. "Harper Lawson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bloomed in Harper's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Vaughn, before you answer," he hurried on, "you should know what you're getting into. The ranch will always demand most of my time and energy. There will be good years and bad. I can promise you a home and my complete devotion, but not luxury or an easy life." "When have I ever asked for luxury?" Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. "All I want is a place to belong. People to love who love me in return." She squeezed his hand. "Yes, Vaughn, yes, I will marry you." His smile was like the sunrise as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he gathered her in his arms, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. They rode back to the ranch in the gathering darkness, the stars emerging one by one above them. Harper's new ring caught the moonlight with each movement of her hand on the reins, a constant reminder of the future that awaited her. As they approached the ranch, they saw unusual activity lanterns moving about the yard, voices calling to one another. Vaughn frowned, urging his horse to a faster pace. "Something's wrong," he muttered. They rode into the yard to find Hank organizing a group of cowboys, all armed. "What's happening?" Vaughn demanded, swinging down from his saddle. "Rustlers," Hank replied grimly. "Hit the north pasture about an hour ago. Took maybe 30 head. Charlie rode in with the news just now." Vaughn's expression hardened. "Any idea who?" Charlie recognized one of them, Jed Fisher. "Works for the box T." Hank spat on the ground. "Henderson's ranch." "Henderson," Vaughn repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Guess he decided if he couldn't get my land legally, he'd take my cattle instead." "We're riding out to catch them," Hank said. "Trail's fresh." Vaughn nodded. "Saddle a fresh horse for me. I'll get my rifle." Harper followed him to the house, anxiety knotting in her stomach. "Vaughn, be careful. If Henderson is behind this, he might be expecting you to follow." "All the more reason to go," Vaughn replied, checking his Winchester rifle with practiced movements. "I won't let him think the double bar is easy pickings." "At least wait until morning," Harper pleaded. "It's too dangerous in the dark." Vaughn's expression softened as he looked at her. He set the rifle aside and pulled her into his arms. "I have to go, Harper, but I promise I'll be careful. We'll track them, get our cattle back, and be home before you know it." Harper clung to him for a moment, then stepped back, squaring her shoulders. Then go. But come back to me, Vaughn Ironwood, we have a wedding to plan. He kissed her once more, fiercely, then took up his rifle and headed for the door. Bar it behind me, he instructed, and keep my old Colt handy just in case. After Vaughn and the men rode out, Harper found herself alone in the main house for the first time since her arrival. The silence was oppressive. She moved from room to room, unable to settle, imagining all manner of terrible scenarios: Vaughn ambushed, shot, left to die on the prairie. Stop it, she told herself firmly. He knows these lands better than anyone, he'll be fine. Still, sleep eluded her. Harper sat in Vaughn's chair in the study, the Colt revolver on the desk before her, and waited for dawn. The first gray light of morning revealed no sign of Vaughn or the others. Harper made coffee, more for something to do than from any desire to drink it. As she was stoking the stove fire, a sound from outside made her freeze hoofbeats, approaching fast. Harper snatched up the Colt and moved to the window, peering cautiously around the curtain. Relief flooded her at the sight of a lone rider, Charlie, the young cowboy who had brought news of the rustling. He dismounted at her run and pounded on the door. Miss Lawson, are you there?" Harper unbarred the door. "I'm here, Charlie. What's happened? Where's Vaughn?" Charlie's face was pale beneath his tan, his eyes wide with urgency. "Ambush, up in Blackthorn Canyon. Henderson had men waiting. There was shooting." He gulped air. "Boss sent me back for help and supplies. Hank's hit bad." Harper's heart seemed to stop. "And Vaughn, is he hurt?" "Don't know, miss. I left before the worst of it. But they're pinned down and Henderson's men outnumber them 2-1. Fear threatened to overwhelm Harper, but she forced it down. Vaughn needed her to be strong now, not hysterical. "How many men are left at the ranch?" she asked, her mind racing. "Just old Pete at the bunkhouse and Miguel with the horses," Charlie replied. "Everyone else rode out with the boss." "That's not enough," Harper murmured. She thought quickly. "Charlie, I need you to ride to the Rocking W Ranch. Tell Wade Wilson what's happened and ask for help. Then go to town and find Sheriff Davis." Charlie nodded. "What about you, miss?" Harper's grip tightened on the Colt. "I'm going to gather what supplies I can and head for Blackthorn Canyon." "That's no place for a woman," Charlie protested. "Henderson's men are holding the man I'm going to marry," Harper finished firmly. "I won't sit here and wait to find out if he lives or dies. Now go, Charlie. There's no time to waste." After Charlie galloped off, Harper moved with focused efficiency. She gathered bandages, whiskey for disinfecting wounds, food, water, and ammunition for Vaughn's rifle, which he had left behind in favor of a newer model. She changed into her sturdiest dress and boots, braided her hair tightly, and tucked the Colt into a belt at her waist. In the barn, she saddled her mare, securing the supplies to the saddle. As she worked, she spoke softly to the horse. "We need to be brave now, Daisy. Vaughn needs us." With a silent prayer for courage, Harper swung into the saddle and set off toward Blackthorn Canyon, following Charlie's directions. The ride would take at least 2 hours, even pushing Daisy as hard as she dared. The sun climbed higher as Harper rode, the August heat intensifying with each passing hour. Sweat trickled down her back and dust coated her throat, but she pressed on, driven by fear for Vaughn and the others. Blackthorn Canyon was a narrow slash in the otherwise rolling landscape, its steep walls providing perfect cover for an ambush. As Harper approached, she slowed Daisy to a walk, alert for any sign of Henderson's men. The crack of a rifle shot echoed through the canyon, followed by another. Harper's heart leapt into her throat. The fighting was still ongoing. She dismounted, tethering Daisy in a grove of scrub pines, and proceeded on foot, the medical supplies in a satchel over her shoulder and Vaughn's rifle in her hands. Moving as quietly as possible, Harper worked her way down into the canyon, using rocks and bushes for cover. The gunfire was sporadic now, single shots rather than volleys, suggesting both sides were conserving ammunition. As she neared the bottom of the canyon, Harper caught sight of movement, a flash of color against the red-brown rock. She froze, holding her breath, then relaxed as she recognized Vaughn's distinctive brown hat. He was crouched behind a boulder about 50 yards away, his attention focused on the opposite side of the canyon where Henderson's men must be positioned. Harper looked for a path that would take her to Vaughn without exposing her to fire from across the canyon. A dry stream bed offered the best option, a natural trench that wound through the canyon floor, coming within 20 feet of Vaughn's position. Taking a deep breath, Harper slipped into the stream bed and began to make her way toward Vaughn. The going was difficult. Loose stones threatened to roll beneath her feet and give away her position, but she moved steadily, keeping low. She was within 30 feet of Vaughn when a shot rang out, closer than the others. A chunk of rock exploded from the rim of the stream bed just above Harper's head. She dropped flat, heart pounding. "I see someone moving down there," a voice called from across the canyon. In the stream bed, another shot, closer still. Harper pressed herself against the earth, terrified to move. "Harper," Vaughn's incredulous voice reached her. "Harper, is that you?" "Yes." She called back, her voice shaking. "I brought supplies." "Stay down," Vaughn ordered. Then, to someone else, "Cover me." A barrage of shots erupted from Vaughn's side of the canyon, answered immediately by return fire from Henderson's men. In the midst of the chaos, Harper felt strong hands grabbing her arms, dragging her out of the stream bed and behind the boulder where Vaughn had been positioned. "Have you lost your mind?" Vaughn demanded, his face inches from hers, eyes wild with a mixture of fury and fear. "You could have been killed." "Charlie said you were ambushed," Harper replied, clinging to his arm. "That Hank was hurt. I couldn't just wait at the ranch, not knowing if you were alive or dead." Vaughn's expression softened marginally. "I sent Charlie for help, not to bring you into danger." "He's gone for help," Harper assured him. "To the Rocking W and then to the sheriff. I came on my own." She unslung the satchel from her shoulder. "Where's Hank? How bad is he hurt?" Vaughn gestured to a shallow cave in the canyon wall where two figures were visible, one prone, the other kneeling beside him. "Took a bullet in the shoulder. He's lost a lot of blood." Harper opened the satchel, showing Vaughn the supplies she'd brought. "Let me help him." For a moment, Vaughn looked like he might refuse, then he nodded sharply. "Stay low. When I give the word, run for the cave. Don't stop for anything." The next few minutes were a blur of terror and exhilaration. At Vaughn's signal, Harper sprinted for the cave, bullets kicking up dust at her heels. She collapsed beside Hank, gasping for breath as Vaughn and the others provided covering fire. Hank lay pale and still, his shirt soaked with blood. The cowboy beside him, Frank, Harper remembered, looked up with relief. "Thank God, he's getting worse, Miss Lawson." Harper set to work immediately, cutting away Hank's shirt to reveal the wound, an ugly hole just below his collarbone. "The bullet went clean through," Frank reported, "but he won't stop bleeding." Harper cleaned the wound as best she could with water and whiskey, then packed it with clean bandages, applying firm pressure. Hank groaned but didn't regain consciousness. "He needs a doctor," Harper said, looking up at Frank. "And soon." "Not much chance of that until Henderson's men clear out," Frank replied grimly. "They've got the canyon mouth blocked." Harper finished bandaging Hank's wound, then moved to the cave entrance where Vaughn was conferring with two other cowboys. "How many men does Henderson have?" she asked. "At least 8, maybe 10, Vaughn replied. "We're down to 5, including Hank, who's out of commission." "And ammunition, running low," one of the cowboys admitted. "Couple dozen rounds between us, maybe." Harper bit her lip, thinking, Charlie should reach the Rocking W by now. "Wade Wilson won't let Henderson get away with this." "If Charlie made it through," Vaughn said quietly, "Henderson might have men watching the trails." The implication hung in the air. They might be entirely on their own. "How long can we hold out?" Harper asked. Vaughn's gaze was steady. "As long as we need to." The standoff continued as the sun climbed higher. The heat in the canyon became oppressive, and water supplies dwindled. Harper moved between the wounded Hank and the men at the cave entrance, offering what comfort and assistance she could. Around noon, Henderson's voice echoed through the canyon. "Ironwood, can you hear me?" Vaughn tensed but called back. "I hear you, Henderson." "This is pointless, Ironwood. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and no one else needs to get hurt after you shot my foreman." Vaughn shouted, "Not likely. Those cattle belong to me by rights," Henderson insisted. "You owe me more than you can pay." Harper touched Vaughn's arm. "He doesn't know the loan's been paid," she whispered. "He thinks he still has leverage over you." Vaughn's eyes widened in realization. "You're right," He turned back toward Henderson's position. "The loan's been settled in full, Henderson. I have the papers to prove it. You have no claim on the double bar or its cattle." A long silence followed this revelation. When Henderson spoke again, his voice carried an edge of uncertainty. "You're lying, Ironwood. There's no way you could have raised that money. Check with your bank," Vaughn called back. "Miss Lawson settled the account weeks ago." Another pause, longer this time. Harper could almost feel Henderson's rage and confusion from across the canyon. The woman. Henderson's voice was incredulous. "She had nothing worth $500. She had something worth a great deal more than money," Vaughn replied, his hand finding Harper's and squeezing it tightly. "Something you wouldn't understand." Before Henderson could respond, a new sound reached them, many horses approaching from the canyon mouth. Harper's heart leapt with hope. "Rider coming in," one of Henderson's men shouted. "It's the sheriff." The tension in the canyon shifted palpably. Henderson's men fell silent, and Vaughn's cowboys exchanged looks of cautious relief. "Henderson," a new voice bellowed. "Sheriff Davis," Harper presumed. "Order your men to throw down their weapons. You're surrounded." What followed was a flurry of activity. Henderson's men, faced with the sheriff and a dozen armed ranchers from the Rocking W, surrendered without further resistance. Henderson himself was arrested on charges of cattle rustling and attempted murder. As Hank was carefully loaded into a wagon for the journey to town and the doctor, Vaughn finally turned his full attention to Harper. "That," he said, cupping her face in his hands, "was the bravest and most foolish thing I've ever seen anyone do." "I couldn't lose you," Harper said simply. "Not when we've only just found each other." Vaughn's kiss was tender despite the dust and grime that covered them both. "I'm beginning to think I underestimated you, Harper Lawson." "A common mistake," she replied with a smile, "one I hope you won't repeat." "Never again," Vaughn promised, helping her onto her mare for the ride home. "Though I'd appreciate it if your next act of heroism could wait until after the wedding." Harper laughed, the sound echoing joyfully through the canyon that had so recently been a battleground. "I'll consider it." The story of the confrontation at Blackthorn Canyon spread quickly through Silveridge and the surrounding ranches. Henderson's arrest and subsequent conviction for rustling and attempted murder removed a shadow that had hung over the area for years. Many other ranchers came forward with stories of his underhanded business practices once the banker's power was broken. Harper found herself viewed with a new respect in town, not just as Vaughn Ironwood's fiancée, but as a woman of courage and resourcefulness in her own right. The ladies who had previously regarded her with curiosity or suspicion now invited her to social gatherings and sought her opinion on matters of importance. At the Double Bar, preparations for the wedding occupied September. Vaughn's brother Vernon returned from Denver, bringing with him news of excellent cattle prices that would secure the ranch's financial future for years to come. The two brothers were cut from the same cloth, tall, blue-eyed, and straightforward, but where Vaughn was reserved, Vernon was outgoing and quick to laugh. "I like her," Vernon told Vaughn one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Harper hang laundry in the yard. "She's got spirit." "More than I bargained for sometimes," Vaughn admitted with a chuckle. "The best ones always do," Vernon replied, raising his coffee cup in a small salute. "Mother would have approved." The wedding took place on the first Saturday of October, a perfect autumn day with clear skies and golden light. Harper wore a new dress of pale blue silk, ordered from Denver by Vernon as a wedding gift. Vaughn looked uncommonly handsome in a black suit, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion. The ceremony was held in the meadow near Sarah's mirror, with the lake reflecting the blue sky and turning trees. Reverend Thomas from the church in Silveridge officiated, and it seemed the entire community turned out to witness the union of Vaughn Ironwood and Harper Lawson. As they exchanged vows, Vaughn slipped a second ring onto Harper's finger to join his mother's pearl ring, a simple gold band that matched his own. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his voice steady and sure, "and pledge to you all that I am and all that I have." Harper looked up into his eyes, seeing there all the love and promise she had ever dreamed of finding. "With this ring," she repeated, placing his band on his finger, "I thee wed, and pledge to you all that I am and all that I have. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder, Reverend Thomas proclaimed. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Vaughn's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise sealed before witnesses. When they turned to face their guests, Harper felt a sense of rightness that transcended all the hardships that had brought her to this moment. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables set up in the ranch yard, lanterns hanging from trees, and a fiddler playing lively tunes for dancing. Harper moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, her heart so full it seemed impossible it wouldn't overflow. As the night deepened and guests began to depart, Vaughn found her standing at the edge of the yard, looking up at the star-filled sky. Happy, he asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Beyond words, Harper replied, leaning into him. I never imagined I could feel this complete. Vaughn turned her to face him, his expression serious in the lantern light. I want you to know something, Harper. What you did giving up your land and your mother's ring to save the ranch, I haven't forgotten it. I've been working with a lawyer in Denver. The deed to the land Henderson took from you has been recovered. Harper's eyes widened. How is that possible? Henderson's assets were seized after his conviction. The land hadn't been officially transferred yet. Vaughn reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar document, the deed to her father's land. This is yours again. You can sell it, keep it, whatever you wish. Tears filled Harper's eyes as she took the deed. And my mother's ring, Vaughn's smile turned regretful. That, unfortunately, is gone. Henderson had already sold it, but he reached into his pocket again and produced a small box. I had this made for you. Inside lay a delicate gold band set with 3 small diamonds. It was not her mother's ring, but it was beautiful in its own right. It's perfect, Harper whispered, allowing Vaughn to slip it onto her right hand. Not as perfect as you, he replied, drawing her close. Mrs. Ironwood. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Harper. I like the sound of that. So do I, Vaughn murmured against her lips, before claiming them in a kiss that promised all the joy and passion of the years to come. That night, as husband and wife, they began their life together in the house that was now truly their home. And if their love was born of unusual circumstances, a desperate woman trying to trade a ring for bread, a kind cowboy offering both, it was no less powerful for it. Perhaps, Harper thought as she drifted to sleep in Vaughn's arms, it was even stronger for having been forged in adversity and sacrifice. In the years that followed, the double bar prospered under Vaughn and Harper's stewardship. The ranch expanded, adding new pastures and modernizing its operations. Their first child, a daughter they named Sarah after Vaughn's mother, was born the following summer, a healthy, robust baby with her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, James, and 2 years after that, another daughter, Elizabeth. The house that had once seemed so empty to Vaughn now overflowed with life and laughter. Harper never regretted her decision to trade her inheritance for the ranch's survival. What she had gained, a loving husband, beautiful children, and a home where she truly belonged, was worth far more than gold or land. And though her mother's ring was gone, its memory lived on in the story Harper told her children on quiet evenings, by the fire, the story of how a desperate trade had led to the greatest treasure of all. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vaughn surprised Harper with a special gift, a small gold locket containing a miniature painting of her parents, copied from the daguerreotype she had carried with her from St. Louis. So you'll always have them with you, he said as he fastened it around her neck. Harper touched the locket gently, then reached up to caress Vaughn's face, now bearing the distinguished lines of a man in his prime. I have everything I need right here, she told him. Everything I ever wanted. Later that night, standing on the porch of the home they had built together, Vaughn and Harper looked out over the ranch that had united them. The moon silvered the grass, and in the distance, cattle moved like shadows across the land that would one day belong to their children. Do you ever wonder, Vaughn asked, his arm around Harper's waist, what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that store that day, if I hadn't been there? Harper considered this for a moment. I believe some things are meant to be, she said finally. Some connections are too important to leave to chance. Vaughn smiled, pulling her closer. Like a woman willing to trade her most precious possession for bread, and a cowboy foolish enough to think he could offer her both. Exactly like that, Harper agreed, rising on her toes to kiss him. The best trade I ever made. And as the stars wheeled overhead, bearing witness to their enduring love, Harper knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true north. Her guiding star not in the distant heavens, but here on earth, in the arms of the man who had seen her value when she had nothing left to give but her heart.